In today's video, we are going to build our very first website, and it's going to look like this. Our website is going to have 3 pages, a home page, an about page, and a contact page where a visitor can fill out a form to reach us, as well as a footer that works to navigate as well. And in addition, our website is going to be mobile responsive. So that means that when we decrease our screen size, the content on the page is going to follow. So let's get into it. The tools we're going to be using is a website browser like Google Chrome, which I use, a code editor like Visual Studio Code, which I also use, and the languages CSS and HTML. This is a time where I would highly suggest that you download Visual Studio Code. And although you can technically write code in a text editor like Notepad, I would highly advise you to just download Visual Studio Code. It's the industry benchmark. It really makes writing code much easier, and you're going to just save yourself a lot of headache by starting off using proper tools right away. So go to Google and type in Visual Studio Code, and you're just going to go to the first link. And here you will see a stable build, which you can download for Mac OS, Windows, Linux. So when you've downloaded the file, run it and install, and keep all the install options to default. So pause the video right here and install Visual Studio Code and continue watching when you're done. Once you have installed Visual Studio Code, run it, open it, and it's going to look a bit like this. Yours is probably going to look a bit different because I already have it installed, but you don't need to mind any of the things that are already open on your Visual Studio Code. You can close everything. What you want to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up here to File. We're going to go to New File, and we are going to select, here you see some options. You can also just type text. We're going to type a text. And now we have opened this little file here. So we can click here and we can basically select what type of code we're going to be writing here. We can also just write it. So HTML, that's the first thing we're going to create. There we go. Now, if we try to save it, now it's just called Untitled1. We're going to save this. We can Control S or just click here, save. And we're going to be given an option to save this folder. And you can pretty much save this anywhere you want to, but for structure and for the purpose of learning the best way how to create websites, I would highly suggest you create a separate folder where we're going to put everything that we create in this tutorial inside this folder. So on my desktop, I've already created a folder called website. So you can name this whatever you want to. And in this website folder, I'm going to put my HTML file. And this HTML file, we're going to call index, and we're going to end that with a .html. So there we go. Congratulations, you have just made your first HTML file. HTML is where we are going to be writing everything that you see on the web page. So if we go back to our what we're going to end up with, this is the heading for this page. Welcome to my home page. This is another kind of subtitle. This is one title, and this is a subtitle. And here is some text. We have an image. So everything basically we see on this web page is going to be created in our HTML file. And then later, we are going to create a CSS file, and that's going to be giving us the power to style these different elements, like giving this navigation bar here a blue background color. So back in Visual Studio Code, we can open a folder here. We're going to open our website folder. Yes, we trust this author. And now we see all the files we are going to be having on our left side here in the Explorer tab. Otherwise, you could just have dropped your file into Visual Studio Code like this, and the same thing would have happened. Basically, now we have our whole folder, our website folder, open here. And we are just going to go ahead and create a new file here as well. We are going to create a style.css file. And your icons probably look different than mine. Don't worry about that. That is due to some extensions I have. We're not going to get into that in this video. But it's going to work the same way for you. It might just look a bit different. So now we have our index.html file and we have our style.css file. Now we are ready to start creating a website. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to go a bit in depth into the different HTML elements and what they mean. But I have already made a video which you can check out up here, describing a bit what the purpose of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we're not going to be using in this video, do. But a short summary is that HTML creates the content and CSS styles it. So the first thing we're going to do here is that we are going to write hello. And then we're going to hit Control S or just save here. And now we see that our hello is saved. So how do we see this on a web page? How does an HTML show up on our browser like this? I'm going to close this website here. And we are going to right-click on our HTML file. Actually, we don't need to do that. We can just find it in our folder, whatever works for you. And we are gonna, you see that it already has the Google Chrome here symbol. And that's because HTML is the file of the internet. That's how websites are hosted. Basically, every HTML file is showing a browser that, hey, this is something that you can open. So if we just double click it, it's naturally gonna open in a browser. So that might be Internet Explorer for you, Mozilla, Firefox, or Chrome, depending on what you are using. And here you can see that hello is showing up. In addition, you can see that the file directory, basically where this folder is saved, is showing up here in the URL. So this is not a live internet site right now. It's just, we're just accessing this file on our computer locally. And nobody else in the world will be able to find this website. It's just stored locally for us. So, but it is very useful when we are developing websites because we don't necessarily want to publish a website before it's ready to be used and seen by others. And the state of our website right now is not very impressive. But we have our hello, and that is a victory in itself if you have never created a website before. And that's pretty cool. What we want to be doing now, in order to speed up our website building process and to see the changes that we make in real time, I want you to just put your browser on one side, and we're going to put our Visual Studio Code editor on the other side. And you can keep this Explorer page open for now, or you can close it by just clicking here. That's up to you. I'm going to keep it open. And if we see here, when I type, it shows up on the web page. And save. And then we hit refresh here. You see that what I type shows up. But this HTML here is not how you actually write HTML. We're lacking a few key components here that we're gonna be creating right now. So you don't just write your text directly like this. You have to write something around the text for the browser to understand what this text is supposed to be. Because right here we don't have any information. What is this text supposed to be? Is it a title? Is it a image description? Is it a navigation? We don't know. The browser, Google Chrome here, doesn't know necessarily what to make of this text. So the creators of HTML, they knew that this was going to be a needed feature. That's why they introduced elements. So instead of writing our text like this, just directly in the HTML, we need to surround this text with something to give it semantic meaning. And by that I mean, if we want to have a title here, we need to surround that title with something, or for the sake of this exercise, a heading like my first web page. We need to surround that heading with a heading element. And the way we do that is we type H, and then you see all these things that pop up here. This is Visual Studio Code suggesting different elements for you based on what you've typed. So the H1 stands for heading 1. And this element, the H1, has already some inherent attributes. So if we copy paste our my first web page title, and we save it into this H1, and we reload, we see that my first web page has become bold, and it's also become very large. That's because we've used correct syntax. We have told the HTML file what to make of this text. Now the file and Google Chrome knows that this is a heading. It's the largest heading that is possible to have because it's H1. If we write H2, and you can either click this or you can just hit enter, you see that it's going to create these little brackets. Like it's going to create this, which means smaller than and larger than. That's how we define that here an H1 is starting, and then here a smaller than and a slash means that it is ending. So most elements have this kind of format, whether it's H1, H2, H3, etc., etc. Things are usually written this way. You just have to remember that, and but you don't have to necessarily type the brackets. You can just type H3, hit enter, and then in Visual Studio Code at least, this will be created for you, and your cursor will naturally end up in the middle where you need to type the text. And then you save. And here we see that our H3 has already been created and is properly shown through Google Chrome. So this is all fine and dandy, but it's not really looking like our web page we wanted to create in the start. And there's a reason for that. We're lacking a couple of things here. But before we continue, I want you to just hit Control Alt and just delete everything we just made. You can save and refresh, because we're going to start this the correct way. Now that we understand what an HTML element is and how it looks like at least a bit, we can start off creating this HTML page the correct way. And every HTML page has a couple of things in common. So I want you to go ahead and type exclamation mark. And then you're going to hit enter. And then this stuff here is going to look a bit overwhelming. Don't worry about that. I'm going to take you through everything and what it means. But basically everything we're going to be writing in that's going to show up in our web page here, we're going to be writing it inside of this body element. So every element has space, just like our heading, between the brackets of the opening body and the closing body element. We can write stuff. And this stuff is what shows up on our web page. And the body is basically the whole body of the web page, accurately described as body. On the top of our web page here, you see we have something called doc type HTML. So basically this is describing for the browser that this whole list here is HTML content. This is HTML code. So there is an HTML closing bracket here and there's an HTML starting bracket here. And between those, sorry, it's here. This describes that the document that you are reading for the computer is of the type HTML. That's what this means. You don't have to worry about that. That's just a standard practice. You need to have that in every single HTML document. Or if it's not an HTML document, something else would have been here. And here is the HTML opening tag, and here is the closing tag. And within this HTML opening tag, we are saying to the computer that the language here used on this site is in English. And this is also for the computer to know. This is not for necessarily humans to care about. This is just for so that the browser knows that this content is in English and should be shown to English speakers and English browser users. And you know, when Google Chrome sometimes wants to translate content for you, then they know what content to translate from and to based on this attribute here. So enough about that. Further, in our head section here, you see it starts here and then it ends here. Don't be too confused about all this stuff here. Again, this is all just standard practice stuff. That's why I wanted you to just hit exclamation mark and just have that copy pasted in for you, because you don't need to remember all of this stuff. This is just for the computer to know how to display your website properly. This line right here is simply for the computer to know what kind of characters we're using. You are going to be using the UTF-8. Don't worry about that. It's basically the characters like A, B, C, 8, 9, 10 that we are using. That's so that the computer again knows what is on the web page. And these meta elements here are elements that you don't see on the web page. In fact, everything in the head element here is not for us to view. It's for the computer to know what's going on and how to display it. Apart from the title here, the title is basically what shows up here on our browser. So here you see document. I'm going to change that to my web page, my first web page. And I'm going to save and refresh, and you see that has updated here. So that is the first thing that we have finished in our web page. All these other stuff, the viewport, the width device, it's basically just to let the computer know how to display your content across devices, and to basically have it be compatible with older devices. So enough about that. Let's get into the interesting stuff. Let's get into our body here. And we are going to start off by creating an H1. We hit enter. And then we're going to call this my very first website. We're going to save and refresh our page. Now we have our first heading. I would like to have a little subheading here as well. So we're going to write H2. And we're just going to call that subheading. Again, save, refresh, and there we go. That's a start at least. Now, when we are not writing in headings, which is kind of titles, it's bold by standard, we want to be writing in something called the P, which stands for paragraph. So if we write a P here, we hit enter, we get the paragraph element, and inside here, we can write whatever we want. Whatever we want. We hit save. And you see that this text looks more just like ordinary text, like what you would read in a book. If we want to fill this out, and we do for this video, we just want to fill it out a bit. You can start writing lorem, and this stands for lorem ipsum, which is a common way to just have some filler text. And you just click save and refresh. So don't mind the formatting I have here. I have also an extension that is called Prettier that is doing the auto formatting for me. But for you, you're gonna have to do this manually. So when you write a new element like H3 and you want to write something in this element, you normally need to indent your content. So writing an H4 here would be incorrect way of writing HTML. And this is basically for your own sake to see, because the computer knows how to read this regardless. You could have this on one single line going on forever. The computer wouldn't care. In fact, that's how the computer reads this HTML page. But for our sake, to know that the H4 is in the H3, we want to indent it. And then we want to indent the H3 from the body to know that the H3 is inside the body. And then you see this line here. Same here, you see that in this paragraph element, there is a line going from the bottom to the start. And inside here, we have our text. So be sure to always indent your HTML based on what is inside what. So now that we have a bit of content here, let's add an image. And we do that by typing EMG, hitting enter, and then we see that we get some thing called SRC, which stands for source, and alt, which stands for alternative text. So this is a good time to find some pictures for us to use on this website. You can use your own pictures. For my sake, I'm just gonna go to Unsplash. I am gonna Google laptop. I'm gonna search, and I'm gonna pick this laptop right here. I've already downloaded it, but if you are not familiar with Unsplash, you just click download. It's nice to give a little shout out to Carrie Shea, who is the creator of this photo. Unsplash is completely free, but it is very nice to attribute the people that are responsible. And then once you have downloaded your picture, we go to our download folder here. You see here I have the second one because I've already downloaded it. I'm just going to delete that. So in my folder here, I can just take this picture and drag it over to our website folder inside VS Code. And I can drop it right there. Alternatively, I'm going to delete it. I can copy this image. I can go back to my website folder and just paste it in here. The same thing happens, it's going to show up in my folder in VS Code. Now we are going to put this photo inside of our website. And how we do that is we just start writing if this index file here, which we are inside, our first HTML file, if it's in the same folder as our image, then we can simply just start typing the name of the image. Here it's named Carrie Shea, and then a lot of numbers here, .jpg. And we just click that, and we hit save, Control S, we refresh our page, and now we can see that there is an image here. That is huge! So we are gonna fix that. This does not look very good, obviously, but don't mind that for now. We are going to go over to our style.css, and now things get interesting, because now we are going to take this image that we dropped in here, that is obviously way too big for our website, and we're going to style it so it fits on the web page. But in order to do that, we first need to link this HTML file with this CSS file. And the way we do that is we go over to our head section here. Just under our title here, we're going to start writing link. And then we're going to click enter. And then by default, in VS Code, it will already have this rel equals style sheet in quotation marks. So what this means is that the relationship of this link is a style sheet. And the href here basically just means URL. It means where are we finding this style folder. And similarly to the image we have, if they are in the same folder, we can simply just start writing the name of our style sheet, style, hit enter, save, and now they are linked. Obviously, we have nothing in our style sheet, so nothing has changed on our website. But we're going to be fixing that right now. So in order to target this image, in order to know what to style in our style file, we need to target our image file. And the way we do that is we are going to write emg, and we're going to write curly bracket. Yours might not pop up immediately with both, but that is a setting in Visual Studio Code. So we're going to write opening curly bracket, and then we're going to hit enter, and we're going to write closing curly bracket. And inside of these brackets, we are going to write the styling for this image. Right now, I'm just targeting every single image on our web page, but there is also a way to target individual images and individual elements separately. But don't worry about that, we'll get into that later. For now, we're going to say to the CSS file that the width, and you can click here or press enter, the width of our image is to be 100%. Now we click save and we update our page. Et voila! Now we see that this image and this website looks a lot more appetizing. And if we decrease the size of our screen, we can see that it's also looking quite nice on different sizes. We are going to continue developing the interactivity of this web page so that it displays very well on mobile phones. But for now, this is pretty good, I would say. So to explain a bit more about what this CSS here means. Here we are saying that all images on this website, there's only one for now, but every single image here is to have a width of 100%, which is pretty self-explanatory. But if you think about it, 100% of what? Because here, as you can clearly see, there is a white line. There is a barrier here that is also on the text, on our headings, and there's even a bigger barrier here above. So what's going on here? Well, in order to explain that, I'm going to have you click right-click on your web page, and you're going to find, depending on which browser you have, something called Inspect, or it might be called Developer Tools, but it's Inspect on Google Chrome. And then a lot of confusing stuff is gonna pop up. Don't mind all of this. We are simply gonna focus on this part here. So if you, on this line, you can kind of drag this part down a bit. And you can close this part if you have it open. Now, if you can also drag this so you see it a bit better. Now we have our web page here, and we have kind of this inspect part here. And as you see, when I'm hovering above, this might be very familiar to you. This is in fact the HTML that we are writing right here. It's the same exact HTML. And when you hover above, let's say, body, you get the entire body shown to you. With, in yellow here, or in light orange, you get shown this white margin that we have noticed. So what is this margin? Well, if you look down here, there is a couple of boxes. Again, this will be probably very confusing looking at it from the start, but when we hover above one box, the inner box here, we see basically the content in our body. And if we go out one step, hover above this padding, nothing shows up because we don't have any padding. The same with border. But when we hover above our margin here, which is the outermost field, we see that there is margin with a number 8. These 8s stand for 8 pixels, and that is just a standard, it's a standard for an HTML document that a body has 8 pixel margins. Now, we might like this, we might not, we can always change this, but for now we're going to leave it at that. But if we then open our body, inside here, we see that if we hover above our H1, we also get to see that H1 also has a margin. If we look down here, H1 has a margin of 21.440 and no padding, no border, and we also see the size of this text actually. It's 350 pixels wide. Now, so that's enough about basically inspecting and pixels and borders and margins. I know this can be very overwhelming at the start if you haven't looked at it, but that's basically why we are putting our style width here of the image to 100%, and we still kind of have white lines on the side of the image, because you would think if you put 100%, then the image would just cover the entire page. And that's what we have told it to do here, but you have to kind of look where that image is placed in comparison to other things. So where is this image in our HTML document? It is inside the body. And if we hover above the body, in blue here, it's showing you the body. And if you see the image, it's completely until the blue line. So it's true what it says. The image is 100% the width of the body. But outside of the body, if we click that, there is a margin. And the margin is the thing that creates the white line. So I hope that was not too confusing. But we're going to go through inspect, and we're going to look at different elements as we continue this video. But for now, that's basically why there's this white line. So continuing, now we have our kind of the first content of our web page. I think we also want to have a bit more text on the bottom of our, like after our image, because now it looks a bit boring. It doesn't really look like a real website. So we're just going to take and copy this whole paragraph element, and we're going to go below our image and we're going to paste it there. We're going to save, hit refresh, and now we have some text below our image as well. Back in our image element, oh, I forgot to tell you this. You might be confused here, as if you had typed image, you would have thought that same as with the paragraph or the body element or the HTML element, you would need to have written image here as well and kind of close that image tag. But an image is a bit of a special occurrence in HTML. It's what's called a self-closing element. So you don't really need the image at the end. It's just the way it is. You just have to memorize that, or you just have to hit image, hit enter, and don't really worry about it. What we are going to worry about is this alt tag here. So alt stands for alternative text. This alt tag here is very important in website design, because this is the way that we give extra information about our images or about our content in general. This is very important for example, people who are blind or visually impaired, because they might be using a text reader in their browser to have it read out to them what is on the page. And if there's images there, like ours, we want to describe to the browser what is in this image, so that someone who is visually impaired can also kind of see through the computer what this image describes. So here we are going to literally just write exactly what this image is. A laptop sitting on a wooden sitting on a wood table. There we go. And then we save and we hit refresh. And now, as you can see, there is nothing new content on our website. But if we go and in the expect here, we see that the alternative text has in fact saved our text. And this is going to be read by anywhere where this is the standard. So very, very important and very key to not forget to include these alt texts for images especially. We want to generally be designing websites for everyone, and that is kind of the rule and the standard in the industry, to be designing for every single disability and to have our websites be user-friendly for every single person, regardless if they're visually impaired or deaf, or they are maybe colorblind. We need to take this into account when creating our websites. Moving on, you might have noticed that we are lacking something in our very top here. We are in fact lacking a navigation bar. So we're going to create that right now. So this might start to become a bit messy looking for you. Don't worry about that. You're going to get used to how HTML looks. You can, if you would like, you see that there is these arrows when you are hovering next to an element next to these numbers. If you click that arrow, you can kind of collapse certain elements that might be taking a lot of visual space for you. So if you collapse them like this might be more to your preference. I like keeping them open usually, because then I can see what's inside. And but yeah, sometimes you wanna be able to switch between the two. Below our body element here, we want to create something that is called a header. And we click enter and enter again, because inside this header, we are gonna write an H3. And this is kind of gonna be our logo for our website. So website title, let's say. And we hit save and refresh. And now we see that we have gotten our website title up here. It doesn't really look visually different from the rest of our headers, but that's okay. We're gonna style that with CSS later. In addition to our H3, inside our header, so press enter under H3, we are going to add something called a nav. And this, you might guess, stands for navigation. Enter again. Inside our navigation, we are going to give basically the links to our website. So inside our navigation, we want a list, and this list has to be our home page, our about page, and our contact page. The way we create lists is by typing UL, hit enter. This UL stands for unordered list, which basically means there's not going to show up a 1 and a 2 and a 3 because the order of the things inside the list don't really matter. They're certainly not in any alphabetical or numerical order. Again, inside this UL, we are simply going to create a list element, which is where we are going to write home. Now, if we save and hit refresh, we see that home has popped up with a bullet point and under our website title, which doesn't really look very pretty, but we're going to get to that as well. For now, we're going to add our next 2 pages by adding another list. Here we're going to write about. We're going to add a 3rd list, and here we're going to add contact. Hit save, refresh our page, and there we have our website pages. These pages, though, as you can see, don't really do anything. I'm clicking them now, and they're not really doing anything because they're just text like anything else. They're not links, they're just a list of words. In order to make this home actual link that we can click on, we have to actually add something else here. So I'm gonna, for a second, just copy out this home by hitting Control X, and I'm gonna add a new element here. If I press A, then you see that there is an A element here that pops up. I'm gonna click enter, and then this A element, you might remember this href from up in our style sheet when we created that. This gives us the opportunity to add a link to something. So in this href now, we're just gonna add the name of our homepage, which is simply called index. And you get also the option here to autofill your link. And then this A element has a space. It's maybe hard to see when you're not used to it, but here is where you can paste in the text we previously had. So home. I'm just going to make this, I'm going to close this Explorer so you can see a bit better. So now we are back to having, we save, and we hit refresh. We have our home text, but now, as you can see here, this home text does something. We click it, and it actually takes us to our web page. We only have this web page, so we don't really see anything different happening, but you see that it's clearly loading the same page over and over again. And it has the standard kind of link look that is the standard in HTML. We're also going to make this prettier later on. So now to do the same with the rest of our links. Let's cut out the about here, press A, and we are going to put our about back here between the A, and we are going to simply write about.html. Although we haven't created this page yet, we can link to it still. As long as we name it this exact name, it's going to work later on. As you can see, when I save and I hit refresh, there is an about here. If I click it, we go to the about page, but since it doesn't exist, we get an error. If we go back, we do the same for the contact page. Control X, A, enter. We paste our contact text back, and we make another link to a contact HTML. Save. Now, I want you to open the Explorer if you've closed it like me. I want you to create a new file, call it about.html, hit enter. It's going to be blank for now. Same with the contact.html, and there we go. So we have two blank HTML pages, but now if we save here, we refresh our main page. When we click on about, you see it actually takes us, I'm going to open this full screen. You see that it actually takes us to the about page, but now it's blank, so obviously nothing is showing up. But the website page still exists, and the link works to take us there. Same with the contact, it goes from index to HTML. Okay, that's pretty cool. We have a working navigation menu here, although very ugly. We're gonna get to that. Now, we want to include in our website a footer. So for the header here, we have a navigation, and we want the same thing at the bottom of our page, which is kind of a standard. Sometimes you just want to have some text or some additional info, maybe links to your social media. But for the sake of ease, we're just going to have the exact same links and the exact same stuff, actually. So we're going to copy this whole header section here. We're not going to copy the header. We're going to just copy everything inside from the nav to the H3. So Control C. We're going to go down to the bottom of our HTML, and just above our body, we're going to write FO, O, and then footer pops up. We're going to hit enter. We're going to type enter, and we are going to paste everything inside here. So now, when I save and I hit refresh, you see that we have the exact same links as at the top of our page. We are going to define and style this a bit differently than the top of our page as well in our CSS. So now the proper fun begins. We're going to go from this kind of ugly looking website. It's okay, you know, like it's not the worst site I've seen. But obviously this is not very appealing. Like these old looking links with the bullet points, like it just doesn't look good. Like one thing we have going for us is that the content does kind of decrease and increase as we increase our web page, but that's pretty much everything that's going for it. Otherwise, it's kind of looking like a very, very outdated Wikipedia page. We're going to change that right now. So I'm going to decrease this again so we can see our code. We're going to keep the inspect open here because it's very useful to see what changes we're making. We are going to open our style sheet again. For now, we just have our image here, but we're going to start making some changes here. And we're going to start from the top here. So as you can see, in our body, we have our header. We don't want our header to be looking like this. We want our title to be on the left side here, but we want our links to be on the right side, which is kind of what you would expect on a web page. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to style it with something called Flexbox. So the same way we targeted our image, we're going to target our header. by simply typing header. We're gonna type a curly bracket, which usually brings us up both. We're gonna hit enter, and inside these curly brackets, we can write all the styling that we want and target our header. So what do we want to do here? We want to display this header as a flex. And we're not going to go into what that means, but it basically gives us the ability to, this display function here, gives us the ability to display this element in question in many different ways. And in this way, by typing flex, we get the power to basically make each element, the title and the navigation, on each side of the page. So now when we see the header, we hover over it in our inspect, you can see these kind of lines around the title and the navigation. And then you see kind of some purple lines on the right side. This is basically the space that has not been used up by the header. So we're getting closer. Now they're side by side. If I decrease and increase the web page, you kind of see that they're still stuck to the left side. We are going to add another code to our header CSS. We're going to justify our content. So you just start typing just, and then you see it's the first option. Hit enter. And if we click center here, and we save and refresh, there we go. Then you see that all the content inside the header has been justified to the center. We don't want that though. We want to have space around, or actually space between. And whenever you are writing code in CSS, you always have, when you're finished with one line, you have to end it with a semicolon, or whatever this is called, the colon with the dot and the comma at the bottom. So you have to include that in every single line. And now if we save and we refresh our page, we see that we have indeed made our navigation, our header, look more presentable. It's still not perfect, but we're getting there. Next thing, I would like to remove these bullet points. So then we're going to have to target something else, because yes, this is the header and the bullet points are inside the header, but they're not the header themselves. Here you see the H3, that's the website title, and the navigation is the one that has the bullet points. And even further, it's the UL that has the bullet points. As you can see, when you hover over it, they turn up in green. So we're just going to write UL here, and we're going to type our curly brackets. We're going to type list style none. There we go. Furthermore, I don't want our links here to have this kind of blue, and then we click on it and it turns into this purple color. It's very old school. It's not really what we want for our website. So we want to also target our list elements, because if you see here, the UL is the whole entire list, home, about, and contact together. But the list elements is the single elements inside, so home. Furthermore, it's actually the A element that we want to grab here, because the A element is the link itself, and home is inside A. So to really target what we want to target here, and that can be confusing when you're first starting out with writing CSS and HTML to know what part to target. And then I would always recommend going back here in inspect mode to basically hover over the different elements. If you've tried to target your navigation here in order to remove the list style, for example, to remove the bullet points, I started doing that as well, and I was frustrated. Why aren't they disappearing? Well, it's usually because you're not targeting the correct element. You have to go either deeper or sometimes also higher up in the hierarchy to remove what you want to remove. But this is a practice thing, and you'll clearly, within a couple of practices and a couple of websites you build, you'll learn this inherently, and it's not actually as difficult as it looks. So here we want to target our A elements. We type A, curly brackets, and then we want to type text, decoration, and then we start typing none. It's the first one here, save, and we refresh our page. And then we can see that the underline for the text is gone. Furthermore, we want a different color. We just want it to be black. So we write color, enter, we write black, and save. Refresh our page, and now you can see that our links are black. Starting to look good. But we don't want our links to be one over the other. We want them to kind of be on the same line, one after the other. So what we're going to do, we're going to look, okay, this is a UL element inside of a nav element. How do we do this? Well, the same way, without going too much into detail, when we choose to display something with flex, we are choosing to display, here in this example, the header, the whole thing in a flex box. So every element inside that header, and in this case it's the H3 and the navigation, they are being flexed compared to each other. And in the same way we use that for the header, we're going to use that for the navigation. The exact same methodology. Before we do that, we're going to just copy this image code. We're going to put it under here, because there's a good practice to start writing your CSS in the same kind of format as your HTML document. So you want to have your header code higher up than, for example, your image code, which shows up lower down. It's just standard practice, and it's more easier to kind of navigate your CSS when you start having a lot of code. So back to our navigation. We want to flex this navigation so they are next to each other. But if we did that, you see that when we hover over the navigation, and this is the part where you need a bit of practice in CSS, you see that all the text is kind of highlighted. So it's not going to work here to flex the navigation. We need to go one step deeper. We need to flex the UL, because the UL is the element that directly has each individual element. If we flex the navigation, we would flex the UL compared to potentially other ULs inside, but nothing would happen to these list elements here. So we just need to go into the UL, we hit enter, we type display, we type flex, we hit save, and there we go. We refresh our page, and we see that both in our header and in our footer here, because remember, these have the exact same names. Here, there is a navigation in a UL in a list. They have the exact same kind of names as in our header, nav UL list. So they're getting the same styling, the same formatting through our CSS. This is how CSS works, unless you target a specific element, and we're gonna get into how to do that later. For now, all ULs are displayed using flex, but the text is a bit weird because it's all smooshed into each other. So we want some space here between home, about, contact, because this kind of doesn't work. We are going to create a new targeting here, a new element styling. We're going to target the list, so each word, in other words. And we are going to type curly brackets. We're going to have something called a padding here. So we want a padding. We want a padding left. And let's try 15 pixels. And then we're gonna save, we're gonna refresh our page. That looks way better. So that works, but what's going on here? Why is the website title kind of dropping down so much when we get close, when we decrease our screen size? I wouldn't like that to happen if possible. So what's going on here? Well, as we can see, our list element has a padding that we just added. Every list item has that. That's how we are creating space between them. But you see when we hover over our UL element here, there is this extra green space on our side here. So there is some space here that we could potentially save by removing the padding on our UL. So we're going to go to our UL targeting here. We're going to write padding. We're going to type 0, and you don't have to include pixels when you just type 0. 0 is 0 regardless of what it is. So we save and we hit refresh. And now when I hover over our UL, you see that there is no padding here. It's only orange kind of color around it, which is the sign of margin, not padding. If we press this computed, you can also see only margin exists, 0 padding. Compared to our list items, where you can see the green, and you can also hover over the green here, and it's 15 pixels, exactly like we had described it. So now, if I decrease the size, you see that there's more room for the website title to keep its shape for longer. Okay, so we're getting there. But here's another thing. Look how the website title is on one height, and then the home, about, and contact is on another height. They kind of don't line up. I would like them to line up. So what's going on here? Well, let's explore our UL inside our nav, and it meets the H3. And you see when I the orange and the blue, it's a bit hard to see, but you see that they line up. So how are we going to make these text line up? Well, we are going to target the header. We are gonna say align items to the center. And we're gonna hit refresh after saving. And now we see that our texts have aligned. There we go. Our header is looking good. Now to improve our footer. How do we target our footer? You guessed it. We write footer, curly brackets, and we're gonna text align our text to the center. And we click save, refresh our page, and now our website title is centered, but our navigation is not. What's going on? Well, if we go and inspect our footer, we see things are aligned here, but our navigation is not aligning. So what is going on? Well, an easy way to do this is by actually going deeper in our targeting. So we want to go inside our footer, we write footer, and we want to target all navigations inside all footers. That's what we're saying this text means. And here we want to text align center. Save, hit refresh. That didn't work. Of course, we don't want to text align the nav. We want to go even deeper. We want to go to the UL of the nav, and we want to justify content to the center. Click save, hit refresh, and now we see it's in the center with a bit of margin in our home here. As you can see, that's not what we want. We would like to have them completely centered. So we're gonna go and copy paste this. And we're gonna go even a step further. We're gonna do list inside a UL, inside a nav, inside a footer. And we're gonna tell them that margins are gonna be 0. Save, refresh. I'm sorry, padding. Padding is gonna be 0. Save, refresh. And now you see that it's centered. It's too centered, like the text doesn't have any space. So what we want to do here, instead of justifying content center, we want to space evenly. And don't forget the semicolon. Save, refresh the page. That looks pretty good. So this is the base for our website. We have all the elements here. We have all the links. They work. We are still lacking some visual elements. We're still lacking the 2 other pages. And that's what we're going to do for our next videos. Because this one is getting too long, we are going to make this website complete. We're going to add some visual style. We're going to make this header follow us when we scroll. We're going to still make it even prettier when we are going full screen, because if we see here, this website kind of doesn't look so good when we make it full screen. It's because we've been designing it for mobile first. But when we go like quite large, it's a bit hard to see this image. The text is kind of very spaced out. It's not working. So that's what we're going to focus on the next videos. I hope you like this video so far. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you want to see more of these videos. And we're going to finish our website in the next video. So I'll see you there and have a good one.